Welcome to The Immigrants. My name is Eze, and on this channel, I talk about politics and ideas that shape our world. And in this video, I'll be talking about EU's fund for Ukraine. The well may be running dry. And this is not surprising since nobody expected that Russia would invade Ukraine. Ukraine is not part of the EU, and the EU is not a military alliance. So it's all emergency all over the place. And it seems that the money that they put in together in the EU bloc is running dry. So let's go into this article that I saw on the Politico website where they talk about this. This is not in the mainstream. Well, Politico is part of mainstream media, but it's not widely reported. And we all know why. And just a disclaimer, I'm not a supporter of Ukraine or Russia. I'm just giving you the news as I see it and sharing a bit of my opinion along the line. So without further ado, let's dive right into the article, and then you can also make up your own mind along the line. And one thing I'll be doing is that I won't be reading the entire article. So I'll leave a link below the like button so you can go and read it, and also Politico can get some traffic. It's just fair that I'm sharing their article. Then let me share the traffic as much as I get on this new channel. So let's dive right in. EU's weapons kitty runs dry as Ukraine seeks more arms. Brussels initially covered 85% of reimbursement requests for Ukraine donations, but the number has dropped to less than half. That's less than 50%. A much touted EU fund meant to help countries replace weapons shipped to Ukraine is increasingly unable to cover an influx of reimbursement requests, and it hasn't even sent out first payment. Days after Russia's war began, the EU set up a €500 million pot, encouraging countries to arm Kyiv and ask the EU to foot the bill. After looking at the receipt it received, Brussels determined it could cover about 85% of those costs, according to estimates shared by three diplomats. Then, the EU authorized an even bigger pot, eventually totaling €1.5 billion. That's when the flood of receipts started. The EU got so many requests that it calculated Brussels could only cover roughly 46% of the asks, the estimates show. The plummeted percentage angered Poland, one of EU's largest weapon donors to Ukraine, and a leading reimbursement seeker, having submitted €1.8 billion in receipt, according to the diplomats. For days, the country blocked a final agreement on disbursing the second tranche of money, hoping to negotiate a higher rate. For them, below 50% is just too little, one diplomat noted. So, what this article is saying so far is that the EU member countries, the money that they pumping into Ukraine to support Ukraine's war effort, is something that the EU bloc promised them or set up a fund to reimburse them. And so it happens that what the EU is budgeting is not even enough to cover 50%. And guess what? Poland is not happy about it because they happen to be pumping more money into Ukraine than any other EU member country. And this is clearly stating that this whole war, this whole sanction, this whole problem going on in Ukraine, unfortunately for the Ukrainians, the EU, their supporter, I think the second largest supporter now after the United States, cannot really afford to support them. Now, does this mean that the EU will stop supporting? I don't think so. And this article did suggest that. And let's continue to read for now. But Warsaw ultimately relented, agreeing on Wednesday to the 46% figure, according to diplomats. The move came as frustration mounted among other member countries who saw Poland are standing between them and large EU payment. Still, the waning payback scheme risks damaging the EU's reputation as a reliable military partner. So, is the EU a military partner now? Well, I guess the Ukrainian war is changing so many things. Just as Ukraine implores Europe for more weapons to aid a counteroffensive and fend off renewed Russian bombardment. Already, EU powers, Germany and France are facing criticism for not donating enough, while some smaller countries say they are running low on supply. Supply of what? Supply of weapon and probably finance. See, some analysts have said that this war that Russia is waging in Ukraine, or this war between the West, led by the United States, against Russia in Ukraine, regardless of how you see it, what some of these analysts are saying from the beginning is that Russia is going to use this war to deplete the arsenal of Western countries. If that is going to happen, knowing the size of the West compared to Russia in terms of military budget and GDP, it's going to be difficult to say now or to stand behind such analysis. But it does seem that there's money problem going on here. EU budget magic. The reimbursement fund itself is the product of a clever EU workaround early in the war. So it's just a workaround. The EU treaties bar the bloc from using its normal budget to fund military adjacent operations. So officials tapped the so-called European Peace Facility, a financing instrument that lies outside the normal budget to help speed up European arms deliveries. EU countries pay into the facility's coffer, and a committee representing each country makes unanimous decisions on how to disburse the money. Money, very powerful thing. Historically, the fund has mostly been used for smaller scale initiatives like funding Georgia's military or supporting an EU training mission in Mozambique. That is new to me. EU training mission in Mozambique. But now it is on the front lines of the war as Ukraine fends off Russia, a first for the EU. Well, other projects have to suffer, and we've seen this in different areas of EU, even the United States budget. Other budgets have to suffer as the war in Ukraine rages on. Ukraine needs the money, I guess, more than other EU project. Bit by bit, the EU earmarked more and more of the facility's 5.7 billion euros budget, which runs through 2027 for weapons reimbursement. And this also shows that Europe, or the EU countries and all the supporters of Ukraine, are using this opportunity to replace their old weapons. So this thing of Europe and Western countries always looking for a way to dispose their unused product or their waste, be it weapon waste or e-waste or just plastic waste in other places, is something that we've seen Germany having some discussion with Ghana about disposing e-waste in Ghana. This now is weapon, and unfortunately Ukrainians and Russians are caught in between, killing each other just for these EU countries to be benefiting from this. And this is a good news for the military industrial complex, the MIC. Oh man, this is getting out of hand. For now, the EU has set aside about 2.5 billion euros from the facility to help cover members' Ukraine donations, but the figure is still trailing far behind the incoming receipt. and EU countries are expected to announce a new tranche of funding soon. The deluge of requests is, in part, due to Poland's robust military donations to Ukraine. Warsaw has already given Kyiv more than 2 billion euros in weapons, pushing receipts sent to the EU well above expectations. War is very expensive. We've read in books, seen in movies, how empires die because of waging war. And now, it also brings the question, how long is it going to take Ukraine to pay back? We know it took Britain about 80 years to pay back the United States what they borrowed for the Second World War. So, Ukraine is not Britain. Ukraine has no empire. Ukraine don't have a strong economy prior to the war, and definitely not during and after the war. So, how long is it gonna take Ukraine to pay back? This is a question that I hope we live to find out if they don't escalate into nuclear Armageddon. So I'm gonna scroll down towards the end of the article so you could go and read the middle if you want. You'll find a link to the article below the like button. So let's go below because there's some interesting point. Relevant reimbursements are starting now, said a spokeswoman, while declining to comment on the reimbursement ratio. The first contract has been signed and the payment will follow the agreed schedule. The delays, and particularly Poland's obstructionism on the 1.5 billion euro second tranche, left numerous diplomats grumbling. Some stressed the fund was never meant to offer countries a full refund. Others accused Poland of asking the EU to cover too much of its cost. This is a grab situation. Everybody's gonna jump in and try to grab as much as they can to cover their expenses. So at the end, there's no free lunch in Freetown. It seems the Poles are holding the key to unlocking the 1.5 billion euros and payments to Slovakia in 2022 and themselves in 2023. One EU diplomat complained before the deal was struck. Ultimately, however, the funding fight has exposed a looming problem for the EU. The Peace Facility Fund is simply too small to be the main financing vehicle if the continent truly wants to become a more reliable security provider. Some officials speculate that soon, member countries will have to open their wallets and pour in more money if they want to be consistent. Of course, they have to if they can afford it. The fund is important, and we want to double it if possible. The freshly appointed Slovak Foreign Minister, Rastislav Kača, sorry, I know I'm butchering a lot of this name, told Politico. And of course, we are ready to increase our contribution in it because all of us contributed to this fund. Taking such a step, he added, is not only important economically, but this is also a political gesture precisely because we should put the money where our mouth is. Like this, that made me laugh. But this is not a funny story because this financial problem that is going on is one of the signs that the EU is again not able to afford what they like to call their own security because they talk as if Ukraine is part of the EU and this fight is a fight to defend democracy. You've heard that a million times. And yeah, it is what it is. And let me open a related article, more of an opinion article. Same on the Politico. I'll also leave a link to this article below the like button so you could go and read it if you're interested. So let's dive right in. I'm not going to read a lot of this one. You can go and read it if you like. The EU's taking too many financial risks on COVID-19 and Ukraine. Hmm. The current off-budget crisis solutions skirt parliamentary scrutiny, undermining the bloc's legitimacy and accountability. So, when money gets tight in Europe, the European Commission and member countries resort to budgetary instruments outside of the regular European Union budget. This became abundantly clear first during the pandemic, then again when Russia's invasion of and the bloc's subsequent support for Ukraine, events which have created massive short and long term financing needs. Ah, Europe. Since Russia's invasion began, the EU has provided 2.2 billion euros to Ukraine in the form of macro financial assistance (MFA), and in October the Commission will borrow a further 5 billion euros in MFA long-term loans to lend to Ukraine. This allows the war-torn country to benefit from Euro's AAA credit rating. So they also trying to patch the Ukraine economy while the war is going on to help them not to become an hyperinflation country. This is telling. You have to admire the desire of the European Union to help Ukraine. It's just not gonna work because of the structure of things. Because some of these countries are not necessarily willing to do it, but because they're part of the bloc. If the bloc is to dissolve right now, believe me, I think 50% of the EU member countries would not be financing Ukraine the way they are. Despite our justified solidarity with the Ukrainian people and our support for the sovereignty of their country, we shouldn't forget that before the war, corruption was endemic in Ukraine. In 2021, the country ranked 122nd on the Corruption Perception Index. Between countries like Gabon and Zambia, a problem that European institutions are well aware of. And if you say this in the public, Ukrainian supporters will eat you alive. But guess what? We all know this anyway. A September 2021 report by the European Court of Auditors even stated that grand corruption was still a key problem in Ukraine, despite the EU's repeated effort to improve rule of law. And this is one of the reasons Ukraine has not been allowed into the European Union, let alone of NATO. Of course, it's next to impossible to check every euro that will be spent, but this MFA support doesn't foresee a strong oversight of the transferred money at all. Without proper budgetary control supported by democratic checks and balances, these European loans could easily fall into the wrong hands. And if major fraudulent schemes were to come to the surface in Ukraine, the public backlash would likely be ferocious. You see, this whole thing is falling apart. I have to put it that way. It's just falling apart. Not fast, slowly but surely, it's falling apart. Because for how long will Europe have economic problem in supporting Ukraine, and also having internal economic problem within the bloc and the member countries? The protest in France at the moment is crazy, and yet the MSM is not reporting on it. Why? Well, we all know why. They call them Putin apologists. But this is not true. These are just everyday people who want better life for themselves and their families. I hope the protest comes to an end, and I hope their questions are answered as citizens of a country that their government owe them good governance. So that's where I'm gonna leave it. And again, if you want to read the articles, I'll leave link to them below the like button. And that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and you catch me in the next one.